a man who preached about the death and passion of Jesus Christ and converted many people. He founded the Congregation of the Passionists. Today's curiosities are about St. Paul of the Cross. Here are 10 facts about him. 10. Origin and large family. St. Paul of the Cross, known in life as Paul Francis Dan Nei, was born in 1694 in the city of Ovada, located in northern Italy. He came into the world in a family deeply devoted to Christianity, being the second of 16 children. The family environment was marked by an intense practice of the Catholic faith, which significantly influenced his spiritual formation from childhood. The religious education he received at home was rigorous and centered on Christian teachings, preparing Paul for a life of deep spirituality and commitment to the faith. The large number of siblings also reflected the context of the time, when large families were common, especially among those who viewed children as blessings and followed religious precepts regarding procreation. From this devout family environment, St. Paul of the Cross developed, while still young, an intense love for prayer and meditation on the Passion of Christ. The piety cultivated in his home, combined with the experience of living in a large family, contributed to his growth with a strong awareness of the importance of service and sacrifice. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do so to not miss any curiosities about the saints. 9. Conversion and calling. At the age of 19, St. Paul of the Cross experienced a transformative spiritual moment that would forever change the course of his life. He heard a sermon about the passion and death of Jesus Christ, a moment of deep reflection on Jesus' suffering on the cross. This sermon had such a strong impact on his heart and mind that he felt irresistibly drawn to dedicate his life entirely to the service of God. Until then, Paul Francis Dan Nei, as he was known before adopting the name St. Paul of the Cross, had lived a pious life but without a clear direction for his future. He had not yet discerned a specific calling to the priesthood or any form of religious life. However, being deeply moved by the mystery of Christ's suffering, he recognized an unmistakable call to live and preach about the passion of Jesus. This conversion experience was marked by a renewed fervor and an unwavering conviction that he should dedicate himself entirely to God. He understood that Christ's suffering on the cross was the supreme expression of God's love for humanity and decided that his mission would be to make others understand and experience this love as well. From this point, he began a life of intense prayer, meditation, and penance, always striving to conform more closely to the image of the suffering Christ. St. Paul of the Cross decided to dedicate himself to the apostolate, with the purpose of spreading devotion to the Passion of Christ. He saw this as a powerful means of leading people to conversion, helping them recognize Jesus' sacrifice and God's redemptive love. This calling not only redefined his personal life but also led him to found the Congregation of the Passionists, whose mission was precisely to preach about the passion and death of Christ to inspire faith and devotion in the hearts of the faithful. 8. Life of penance. After his conversion, St. Paul of the Cross adopted a profoundly austere and penitential lifestyle, driven by the desire to imitate the suffering of Jesus Christ and unite with his passion. Convinced that the path to true union with God required renunciation of worldly pleasures and personal sacrifice, Paul chose to live in a simple and rigorous manner, embracing a life of poverty, prayer, and mortification. He began to wear a black habit, symbolizing his devotion to the Passion of Christ, adorned with an emblem featuring a heart with a cross, 3 nails, and the monogram of Christ. This habit was not merely a garment but an external sign of his total dedication to God and his commitment to living a life of penance and sacrifice. For Paul, wearing the black habit was a constant reminder of his life's purpose, to preach and live the passion of Jesus Christ. In addition to his austere clothing, St. Paul of the Cross practiced rigorous physical penances. He often subsisted on bread and water alone, rejecting any form of luxury or comfort in his diet. This act of renunciation was not merely an exercise in deprivation but a means to draw closer to the humility and suffering of Christ. Sleeping on the floor was another practice he adopted, rejecting the comfort of a bed to discipline himself and maintain constant remembrance of Jesus' pain and sacrifice. These practices of rigorous penance served a dual purpose. First, they were a means of personal purification, helping St. Paul of the Cross combat his own weaknesses and worldly desires, strengthening his spirituality and commitment to God. Second, they were a form of solidarity with Christ's suffering, allowing Paul to share, even if symbolically, in the pain of Jesus' passion. Leave your prayer requests in the comments for St. Paul of the Cross to intercede for you before God. 7. Foundation of the Congregation of the Passionists. St. Paul of the Cross founded the Congregation of the Passionists with the aim of awakening a deep love and devotion for the passion and death of Jesus Christ in the hearts of the faithful. The idea of creating a new religious congregation arose from his intense desire to promote reflection on Jesus' sacrifice as the ultimate expression of God's love for humanity. For Paul, the Passion of Christ was not just a historical event but a mystery of faith that offered comfort, inspiration, and an opportunity for spiritual transformation. From a young age, Paul felt a strong calling to spread devotion to the Passion of Christ. After his conversion at 19, he began to preach and attract followers who joined him in meditating on Jesus' sufferings. Recognizing the need for an organized effort to spread this devotion, Paul of the Cross shared his vision with a local bishop, who supported his mission. Over time, he was formally authorized to form a group of followers committed to his cause. The Congregation of the Passionists was officially established in 1720. The focus of the congregation was to preach popular missions, public sermons and spiritual retreats, centered on the Passion of Christ. The Passionists believed that by meditating on Jesus' suffering, the faithful could experience a profound spiritual conversion and a greater commitment to the Christian life. The Passion was seen as a spiritual remedy that could heal inner wounds, offer hope in times of difficulty, and strengthen bonds of love and faith. In addition to preaching about the Passion of Christ, the congregation also dedicated itself to a life of rigorous religious observance, incorporating intense prayer, penance, and a profound communal life. Members of the congregation, known as Passionist priests, take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, along with a special fourth vow to promote the memory of the Passion of Christ through their lives and ministries. The congregation of the Passionists quickly grew, attracting many men who shared the same desire to preach the Passion of Christ and live a life of holiness. The Passionists spread throughout Italy and other countries, establishing religious houses and continuing their mission of evangelization. St. Paul of the Cross not only founded the congregation but also wrote its rules, establishing a structure of communal life that combined contemplation and action, prayer and preaching. Today, the Congregation of the Passionists continues to exist in various parts of the world, honoring the legacy of its founder and working to keep the memory of the Passion of Christ alive. 6. Establishment of a female institute. In addition to founding the Congregation of the Passionist Fathers, St. Paul of the Cross also established a female institute of strict enclosure, known as the Passionist Sisters. Similar to the male congregation, the female institute was founded with the purpose of cultivating a profound devotion to the Passion of Jesus Christ and living a life dedicated to prayer, penance, and contemplation of Christ's sufferings. St. Paul of the Cross understood that the call to meditate on and preach about the Passion of Christ was not exclusive to men. Women also had a vital role to play in living out and spreading this charism. He believed that through prayer and sacrifice, women could spiritually unite themselves with Christ's sufferings and offer their lives as a testimony of love and devotion to Jesus' redemptive sacrifice. The Passionist sisters were founded to follow a life of strict enclosure, separated from the outside world to dedicate themselves entirely to God. The enclosure represented a means of protecting the sacred space necessary for a life of continuous prayer and meditation on the Passion of Christ. Inspired by St. Paul of the Cross's example, the sisters embraced a life of silence, contemplation, and sacrifice, seeking to imitate Christ's humility and suffering in their daily lives. The female institute followed strict rules that reflected the spirit of penance and total dedication that Paul of the Cross deemed essential for a consecrated life. The Passionist sisters dedicated their lives to fervent prayer for the Church and the salvation of souls, making their lives an act of constant intercession, uniting their sufferings and prayers with those of Christ on the cross. St. Paul of the Cross also emphasized the importance of communal unity and charity among the sisters. He believed that community life was a powerful form of Christian witness and that fraternal love was essential to sustaining the spirit of sacrifice and penance that defined the Passionist sisters' lives. The institute grew over the years, attracting women who wished to dedicate their lives to Christ through prayer and sacrifice. The Passionist sisters spread to different regions, founding convents and continuing St. Paul of the Cross's mission of keeping the memory of Jesus' Passion alive. They became a beacon of faith and spirituality, offering an example of total and unconditional devotion to God's love. 5. Influence and conversions. St. Paul of the Cross, with the support of a bishop, played a crucial role as an instrument of conversion and spiritual renewal for thousands of people. His dedication to spreading devotion to the Passion of Christ had a significant impact on many people's spiritual lives, deepening their understanding and love for Jesus' redemptive suffering. After his decision to dedicate himself entirely to God's service, St. Paul of the Cross received encouragement and support from a local bishop. This support was crucial for him to embark on his mission of preaching about the Passion of Christ and establishing his spiritual work. With the bishop's authorization and blessing, Paul began a journey of preaching and missions that took him to various locations, where he shared his profound contemplation of Jesus' suffering. His unique and fervent approach to devotion to the Passion of Christ captivated many hearts and brought a new understanding of Jesus' sacrifice. St. Paul of the Cross emphasized that meditating on the Passion was not just a spiritual exercise but a way to find relief for personal pains and challenges. He taught that Christ's cross, despite being a symbol of suffering, was also a manifestation of divine love that brought salvation and hope. Through his preaching and exemplary life, St. Paul of the Cross managed to convert many people to Christianity and inspire them to live a deeper life of faith. His sermons were marked by a passion and sincerity that deeply touched listeners, leading them to a more profound reflection on the meaning of the cross and Jesus' sacrifice. St. Paul of the Cross's influence extended beyond his preaching, as he also dedicated time to writing and composing works that helped spread his message. His writings and teachings were effective tools for spiritual edification and the formation of new converts. The impact of his words helped solidify devotion to the Passion of Christ, inspiring a more conscious and committed practice among the faithful. The success of his mission of conversion and spreading devotion to the Passion of Christ led to the foundation of the Congregation of the Passionist Fathers, which continued and expanded his spiritual work. 4. Rigid rule. When St. Paul of the Cross founded the Congregation of the Passionist Fathers, he established a stringent rule of life for its members, reflecting his deep commitment to penance, contemplation, and preaching the Passion of Christ. The rules were designed to ensure that members lived radically and authentically, dedicating themselves entirely to God and the mission of promoting devotion to Jesus' suffering. The rule he created demanded a life of extreme austerity and discipline. The Passionists were to live in rigorous poverty, renouncing all material possessions, and commit to intense practices of penance and bodily mortification. Fasting was a fundamental part of daily life, and periods of prayer and contemplation were long and frequent. Community life was also highly structured, with strict schedules and a constant focus on union with Christ through meditation on his passion and death. Additionally, St. Paul of the Cross's original rule included the observance of nearly continuous silence, except during moments of preaching and spiritual guidance. The Passionists were encouraged to dedicate as much time as possible to prayer and reflection, minimizing social interactions and worldly distractions. This intense life of prayer and mortification aimed to draw the religious closer to Christ's suffering, allowing them to live more fully their charism. However, this extremely rigid rule, which mirrored St. Paul of the Cross's own ascetic and mystical spirituality, faced resistance from ecclesiastical authorities. The proposed level of austerity was seen as excessively severe and, in some aspects, impractical for a large number of people. Furthermore, the Church had concerns about the physical and spiritual well-being of the religious, recognizing that health and the ability to effectively serve the Church's mission also needed to be preserved. In light of these concerns, St. Paul of the Cross was advised to moderate some of the more severe practices of the rule to obtain formal approval from the Church. He accepted the need for adjustments, acknowledging that a more balanced rule could make Passionist life accessible to more people and ensure the congregation's longevity and growth. With these modifications, the Congregation of the Passionist Fathers received ecclesiastical approval, allowing the congregation to expand and welcome new members who wished to dedicate themselves to preaching the Passion of Christ without the extreme rigors of the original rule. Despite the adjustments, the spirit of penance, prayer, and deep meditation on Jesus' sufferings remained central to the Passionists' lives, ensuring that the essential charism of the congregation continued to be lived fully. 3. Symbols and vestments. The black habit adopted by St. Paul of the Cross for the Congregation of the Passionist Fathers is rich in symbolism and deeply reflects the devotion to the Passion of Jesus Christ. The habit, which has become one of the visual hallmarks of the congregation, is not merely a piece of clothing but a powerful symbol of the Passionists' mission and spirituality. The habit is predominantly black, a choice representing penitence, humility, and mourning for Christ's passion. The black color symbolizes the seriousness and depth of meditation on the suffering and death of Jesus. It is a visible sign of the Passionists' commitment to a life of prayer and sacrifice, in which the suffering of Christ is continually remembered and lived. Central to the design of the habit is a heart with a cross, which is one of the main symbols. The heart represents Jesus' burning love for humanity, while the cross is the symbol of Christ's supreme sacrifice. Together, they evoke the depth of Jesus' love and suffering, emphasizing the importance of the Passion in the spiritual life of the congregation's members. In addition to the heart and cross, the habit includes 3 nails. These nails are a direct reference to Jesus' crucifixion, representing the nails used to fix Christ to the cross. They serve as a constant reminder of Jesus' physical suffering and the sacrifice he made for humanity's redemption. For the Passionists, the nails are a symbol of their mission to preach and meditate on the Passion of Christ. The monogram of Christ, which is also part of the habit, is a combination of the Greek letters chi, chi, and rho, the first two letters of the name Christ in Greek. This monogram signifies the centrality of Christ in the Passionists' lives and is a reminder that their spirituality and mission revolve around Jesus and his passion. The use of these symbols in the habit is not merely decorative but is deeply rooted in the Passionist spirituality. Each element of the habit is a means of continually recalling the mission to meditate on the Passion of Christ and to live in accordance with this sacred mystery. For the members of the congregation, the black habit with its symbols is a visible expression of their vocation and a way to experience daily their devotion and commitment to Jesus' redemptive love. Thus, the habit is much more than a simple garment. It is a visible testimony of the Passionist spiritual mission and the depth of their devotion to the Passion of Christ. Each time a Passionist wears the habit, they are reminded of their call to live and promote the memory of Jesus' sacrifice in all aspects of their life and ministry. 2. Death and spiritual legacy. St. Paul of the Cross passed away in 1775 at the age of 81, leaving behind a profound and enduring spiritual legacy. His life and mission were marked by an intense and passionate devotion to the Passion of Christ, which he viewed as the center of divine love and human redemption. Throughout his life, St. Paul of the Cross devoted himself to promoting the contemplation of Jesus Christ's Passion as a source of spiritual transformation and consolation. For him, the Passion was not merely a historical event but the deepest manifestation of God's love for humanity. He believed that by meditating on Jesus' suffering and death, the faithful could find relief for their own pains and challenges and a renewed understanding of God's redemptive love. St. Paul of the Cross saw the cross as a symbol of salvation and mercy. He taught that the cross, despite being an instrument of suffering and death, was also a sign of God's infinite love for each person. Through his own life and the work of his congregation, Paul sought to teach that the cross should be embraced not as a burden but as a source of hope and spiritual renewal. For him, the Passion of Christ was a balm that softened human suffering, offering a path to inner peace and salvation. His spiritual legacy is kept alive through the works of the Congregation of the Passionist Fathers and the Institute of the Passionist Sisters. These groups continue to promote devotion to the Passion of Christ, following the charism and teachings of St. Paul of the Cross. The popular missions, preaching, and intense life of prayer that characterize the work of the Passionists are a direct reflection of Paul's spiritual vision, which saw the contemplation of the Passion as central to Christian life. St. Paul of the Cross's influence also extends through his writings, which continue to inspire and guide those seeking a deeper understanding of Christ's suffering and divine love. 1. Canonization. St. Paul of the Cross was canonized by Pope Pius IX in 1867, and his feast day is celebrated on November 19. The canonization not only recognized the holiness of his life and his contribution to the Church but also cemented his legacy as a spiritual master whose vision of the Passion of Christ continues to touch and transform lives around the world. Following his canonization, the body of St. Paul of the Cross was venerated in the Basilica of Saints John and Paul in Rome, a significant location that serves as a center for worship and devotion. This basilica, located in the heart of the Eternal City, is an important site of pilgrimage and adoration for the faithful who wish to honor the saint's memory. We've reached the end of another story full of intriguing details. Don't forget to leave in the comments which saint you'd like to see featured here on the channel. Until the next story.